Good morning, everybody. Welcome to those who may be tuning in right now. Welcome to Freedom Fellowship and Prophetic Breadcrumbs. On today, we're going to do a prophetic update. If you've been following what's going on in the news, you know there's a lot to talk about here over the last 2 or 3 months. And so I'm not going to cover all of that because we'd be here all morning. But there are certain things that I've highlighted on this morning that we're going to touch on. And so before we do that, let's pray. Father, we thank you and we praise you for this time we have to share with one another, with you and in your word. And we just pray that you'll have your way. Say what you desire to say and do what you desire to do. And we thank you and we praise you for it. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. So here is what we're going to be looking at on this morning. We're going to be looking at what the administration called Operation Absolute Resolve, the removal of Maduro from power. And that, of course, surrounds the nation of Venezuela. So quite a bit to say about that, but I'm not going to cover everything that you could say about it. Then we're going to talk about the protests that are occurring in Iran and the implications associated with that. We'll talk about the current status of the ceasefire in Gaza, if that's what you want to call it, because it's really not a ceasefire, and there are things that could possibly flow from the status quo that's there now that could happen here in the next month or two. Then we're going to look at the summit that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had. Some of that, of course, covers the ceasefire in Gaza, but there are other things that they discussed as well. And then lastly, we're going to give an AI or artificial intelligence update. Based on my research, they expect here in 2026 for AI to hit like big, huge, as far as impact on our society and how we conduct our business here. So we're going to touch on that as well. So let's begin by looking at Operation Absolute Resolve. This, of course, is an order that was issued by President Trump for the capture and/or arrest of President Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. I probably misspelled Celia. I think it's C-I-L-I-A, not C-E. This occurred on the night of January 2nd, 2026. This action was taken based on a 4-count 2020 indictment issued in the state of New York. There's a reason why I point this out, which you'll see here in a couple minutes. These are the following charges that were made as a part of this indictment. Narcotics terrorism, that President Maduro was using drugs as part of his campaign against the United States of America. The pushing of narcotics in particular. What's the big danger was when fentanyl, and of course cocaine and all of those other types of things. Again, and another count was conspiracy to import cocaine, as well as the possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and the conspiracy to acquire more of these types of weapons as well. So all of that was part of the indictment. Of course, politics being what they are, this action was immediately met with objections from most, all Democrats, and even a few Republicans. Most Republicans, though, supported the actions that were taken by the president. One thing that both sides are saying, though, that they want further details on what actually happened, and what many people are more concerned with is what will follow. So what are the objections to the president's actions? Democrats believe the actions, or this particular action, was unlawful. They're saying that it's unconstitutional. There are those who believe this required the approval of Congress, and they do not believe that this action was justified. So that's the case, and you're probably going to hear a lot more of these points being made by Democrats over the coming days, this upcoming week. And I have this question here: are they correct in their assessment? There's a gentleman on Fox News that I have great confidence in. His name is Jonathan Turley. He's an American legal scholar, constitutional attorney, as well as a commentator. And the reason why I like him is because though he's on Fox News, he's actually a Democrat and a liberal. But the facts, the things that he points out, are based on what the Constitution actually says and on legal precedent. So according to him, the president is and was not required to consult Congress on this action. He was not required to do that. Past presidents, in particular President Obama, President Bush the Elder, have conducted similar actions in the past. One thing that President Obama was known for was his so-called hit list or kill list, and he even took out individual Americans based on this without getting congressional approval. So that was, and when he was in office, that was a point of debate during his administration. His use of the drones to take out folks. That was something of great debate during his administration as well. President Bush the Elder, I'm talking about George H.W. Bush, I remember this because I was a young airman in the United States Air Force when he removed Noriega from Panama. He did not seek congressional approval for that. He did it. And so there is precedent already set for the actions that President Trump took. So in my humble opinion, though, again, the opposition to Trump are going to raise these points and probably even a few more against what he did in Venezuela, legally, they're really not going to have a leg to stand on. So a lot of what they're going to be saying is going to be for the sake of social media, propaganda, that type of thing. Especially because this is 2026. We have the midterm elections that are coming up this November. More than likely, this is going to be one of the bullet points that they use. Now, what are the president's reasons for doing this now? Number one, it's part of his war on drugs. I was talking with my daughter on yesterday because she's kind of concerned about what happened on yesterday. And I said part of it is he's fulfilling a promise that he made. He said he was going to deal with drugs in the United States, bring an end, if not an end to it, greatly decrease the flow of drugs in the United States of America. Well, the number one action he took was he closed the border. We have virtually zero people now who cross our border, especially the southern border. And secondly, because Venezuela and Maduro in particular, if you've watched the news, you've even seen us take out some of the boats that were transporting drugs to the United States of America, and you saw the drugs floating in the ocean. So this is all part of the campaign that he said he would wage against drugs in the United States of America. It also allows him to reestablish the Monroe Doctrine in the Western Hemisphere. If you're familiar with the Monroe Doctrine, basically what that is it gives the commander-in-chief the leverage to control the activity that occurs in the Western Hemisphere. If he or she considers that there are foreign powers that serve as a threat to us here in the Western Hemisphere, then the commander-in-chief, based on this Monroe Doctrine, now some people are trying to rename it as the Trump Doctrine, that they can take actions. And the reason why I believe, and you guys have heard me even talk about this here in Prophetic Breadcrumbs, it wasn't just about the drugs when he removed Maduro. Maduro had connections to Russia and especially to China. In fact, President Trump, in part of his response or his explanation to the nation, was that he was entertaining what he considered enemies to America there in Venezuela. I believe that is the real reason for the actions that he took, along with the drugs. But I think that's probably the central reason. That's why I say here, his actions in Venezuela, I believe, also serves the purpose of sending a message to Russia and especially China. We've talked about China's Belt and Roads initiatives. Well, they were conducting that down in Central America, that area there. So he's sending the message to them that the Western Hemisphere belongs to America. There's a new sheriff in town, if you will. Or should I say, better said, the old sheriff has returned. Because in my research, too, under the Obama administration, when John Kerry was Secretary of State, he basically said that the Monroe Doctrine was no longer needed. And therefore, just basically said, we're dismissing it. Is it coincidental that nations like Russia and China, after that occurred, started making great inroads here in the Western Hemisphere? So I think that was the major reason he was doing this. It also sends a message to Cuba, who was responsible for Maduro's security and may actually have engaged us in Venezuela when we went in there to get Maduro. So again, and you know, if you follow President Trump, he's big on sending messages. Also, the U.S. will have a greater say in the oil reserves that are there in Venezuela. From my understanding, when Maduro, and actually probably preceding him, I forget the person that was in office before him. Well, Chavez, yes, Chavez. When they came into power, they actually nationalized their oil reserves, which greatly squeezed our oil companies basically out of there. Well, Trump is like saying that will reverse, that will change. In all actuality, it actually puts us in the position where Russia will have to come to us. So there's a lot wrapped up in this. So what's next? That's the big question. President Trump has said that they will somewhat, I guess, control Venezuela until elections are held to elect a new leader. That's what he said, that we will control. Now, there's a lot in that statement. They want the president to explain what he means by control. Because one of the things that I'm hearing, and I used to hear this years ago, that the United States of America should not be in the business of building nations. Or you hear the term nation building. So the president is going to need to explain what does he mean. Because right now, there really is, you have to ask the question, who's running Venezuela right now? Because here's the thing. Though they removed Maduro and his wife, of course, he still has an infrastructure set up there in Venezuela. So what's going to happen to them? Also, the vice president under Maduro, I saw a picture of her. Apparently, she's in Russia right now. Probably not coming back. So the big question is, who's running Venezuela. And if you've been paying attention in the news, it appears from what they're showing, Venezuelans are thrilled with the fact that Maduro has been removed from office. So now, right, they're a nation in flux right now. And because we're the ones responsible for removing Maduro, we're primarily going to be responsible for what happens from this point forward with the nation until they get the person that they want in office. And trust me, America has a vested interest in who succeeds Maduro. One of the things that I did not bring up, but also set legal precedent for President Trump taking the actions that he did, is number one, Maduro was indicted under the Biden administration. So they can't accuse him of just taking some unilateral action. No, he was indicted under President Biden. Number two, when Maduro came into office, the United States of America never acknowledged him as the leader of Venezuela, because apparently there's an international law that says you can't remove a duly elected person. Well, we never acknowledged him, and not just us, there were other nations that never acknowledged him as the leader of Venezuela. So that's why, again, I'm just reinforcing the fact that I don't think in terms of ramifications for President Trump, he's standing on solid ground for the actions that he took. Now, two of the people that America favors to ascend Maduro is this gentleman Edmundo Urrutia, I'm probably messing that up, and Maria Machado. There's speculation as to which one of those, and there are a couple other people too that could possibly succeed him as well. My understanding, the Trump administration probably favors Machado. She has come out as a big supporter of President Trump. She appears to have the best interests of the people in mind. There are certain actions she has already stated that she would take should she succeed Maduro that favor the Trump administration. So that's probably the person that America favors, but we'll have to wait and see who actually takes that position. My understanding is that the first gentleman here would not be a bad person either to succeed President Maduro. In fact, he ran against Maduro last year, and he's the reason why they never endorsed Maduro, because they believe that Maduro stole the election from him, and it was Machado that threw her support behind him as well. So we'll see how that all turns out. And this is just January 3rd. Now let's look at the ongoing protests that are occurring in Iran. The protests that are occurring there are partially due to a failing economy. The actual protests forced Iran to shut down its government. The confrontations, I've watched a little bit of video, are starting to become violent. As a result, President Trump promised the Iranian leadership that if they attack the protesters, he will act to protect them. Now, based on what we've just observed happening in Venezuela and the fact that America acted to remove Maduro, that action sends a message to the leadership of Iran as well, especially in light of the fact that we attacked their nuclear sites in June of 2025. They know this president, if he says he will act, he will act. Again, what happened in Venezuela sends a lot of messages across the globe. Of course, Iran, They blame everything that's going on Israel and the United States of America. Israel is the little Satan, we are the great Satan. And so that's what they're using to try to persuade the people. It's not working. And if you've been paying attention to what goes on in Iran, the protests that are occurring have been bubbling for a while. And so because of how bad things have gotten there economically, people have reached a point of frustration where they're like, something has to change. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, because there is a sizable group of believers in Iran. So truly pray for those believers in Iran, because they're going to be greatly affected by what happens. My concern, and this just occurs to me, when a nation that has the kind of leadership, and I'm going to call it what I believe it is, evil, they look for someone they can blame for everything. If you go back to AD 70, Nero blamed the Christians for everything that was going wrong in Rome. So that's why I believe the believers there in Iran will definitely need prayer right now, because they could be vulnerable. They could be the ones, because yes, everybody knows Iran blames the U.S. and they blame Israel, but they can't do anything with that or about that. But if they can blame a group of people within them and use them as the object of their ire, leaders like these will do that. So pray for the believers that are in Iran. Next, we're going to look at the current status of the ceasefire in Gaza. Yes, there is a so-called ceasefire in Gaza, but yet there's still fighting going on. And Hamas is taking advantage of this so-called ceasefire to rebuild a new terror apparatus. They are basically filling in what was lost. They're replacing what was lost. And of course, they're getting money. They're getting funds from someone. Now, Iran is in dire straits right now. So who are they getting funds from? That's the question. Now, some funds could be coming from Iran at the expense of their own people. But I suspect that they're getting funding from other places as well, especially because places like Qatar and Turkey actually host the leadership of Hamas. Though they've come out and said, though, we're going to stand against what Hamas is doing. Hamas is busy boosting their military, rebuilding them up. They are restoring their leadership structure. So they have no intention of standing down like they're supposed to do according to this ceasefire. We've been in stage 1 of this for a long time. They're also recruiting new teenage fighters. Maybe because those are the only people they really have to recruit from right now. So in other words, in my opinion, they're preparing for war again. Because remember, one of the chief tenets of Hamas is the destruction of Israel. They have not renounced that. So basically what they've done is agreed to this so-called ceasefire, not for the purpose of bringing peace, but for the purpose of rebuilding. So you could look for engagement again on the part of Israel in response to what's going on. That's basically part of the agenda of the Trump-Netanyahu summit. They discussed several things. I'll point out a couple that I found out about. Again, Hamas's refusal to give up their weapons. They refuse to give up their weapons. Again, we just talked about the actions they're actually taking under this so-called ceasefire. My big concerns concerning this is the fact that at some point, and my understanding as a result of this summit, if Hamas doesn't do what they're supposed to do very soon, President Trump is going to greenlight Israel taking the actions needed to totally wipe them out. Here is the problem. If Israel does that, more than likely there are going to be innocent casualties of this as well, which means the anti-Semitism that is spreading wildly already in the world will just increase. Also, that something that was a part of this summit was possible actions that they could take against Hezbollah as well, because Hezbollah is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Lebanon is supposed to be disarming them, disbanding them, but they're not being very effective in carrying that out. So it's quite possible that Israel will be engaging Hezbollah once again. Now, one group that I have not heard much about are the Houthis, so maybe they've stood down. But Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, not so much. So, as a result, especially because there are rumors, I saw this as well, that Iran is actually trying to rebuild their nuclear capability. Again, it does make sense why, if Iran, because of the tenuous position they're in because of sanctions, if they're doing these other things to like rebuild their nuclear capability, that is occurring at the expense of the people. And that's one of the reasons why you have the demonstrations occurring in Iran. So as a result, it's quite possible that the U.S. and Israel will attack Iran again. So the biggest thing that I'm seeing by discussing the very things we're talking about, that instead of things calming down in 2026, they're actually ramping up. So I think I said this in Torah to Ian yesterday. I said, buckle up. Because 2026 may be a wild ride. And one of the things, and I was discussing this with Mario as well, 2026, the midterm elections are coming up. And Mario pointed this out. President Trump has to get as much of his agenda done before those midterm elections, because tradition says, the past says that whoever is in power, whatever party is in power, loses the midterm elections. If President Trump loses the midterm elections, then he won't be able to accomplish everything that he desires to accomplish. In other words, whatever he doesn't have done by November will not get done. And considering the fact that this is his last term, contrary to popular belief, he really has nothing to lose. So he's going to go for it. So that's why I say, for us here in America and in the West, we need to buckle up for what may occur in 2026. Lastly, I want to talk about artificial intelligence. I found out a lot in my research here, and really just scratching the surface. I didn't really go in, because there's a lot of things that I saw that were very technical that really weren't appropriate for what we're discussing here. But here are some of the things that I found out. AI, artificial intelligence, is going to go from being a quick source of information to becoming partners with humans. Right now, when you do Google searches, when you go to the specific AI intelligences, you can type in a question, you can even put in parameters, and it will spit out information. That's going to not only continue, but it's going to become something more than that. They have what are called AI agents that will help teams accomplish in days what may have taken weeks or months to do. The impression that I got in my research is that these AI agents, like I said here, will behave like humans. They will perform tasks or solve problems with minimal human input. That's what they're saying is going to occur here in 2026. AI will increase the accuracy of diagnosis of health problems as well as treatment planning. So, based on information that it's given, it will diagnose health problems and even spit out a treatment plan based on the diagnosis that it makes. That is what they are seeing. AI will become a partner in research and development. Quote, it will actively join the process of discovery in physics, chemistry, and biology. So, in other words, live scientists will basically be partnering with scientists in the computer. They won't just be, hey, here's information, put that in a graph, that type of thing, spit out information a certain way. No, it's going to be providing guidance and instruction just like a real doctor would. Something that I also found out too, Microsoft, they're experimenting with this particular AI in the field of medicine, where based on what was input to it, the AI diagnosed the problem with an 85+% accuracy versus the normal expert doctor, and their accuracy is normally at 20% or 21%, I think is what I saw. So they are looking at AI making great inroads here in 2026. That's not years down the road. They're talking about this year. This was something that I found out accidentally. AI music is becoming the big thing now, to the point that several songs have topped the Billboard music charts, and you didn't know it was AI. Here's how I stumbled upon it. I heard this song by this person called Solomon Ray. Really nice song. I think it was this song, Find Your Rest. There was something similar to it. It topped the Christian music iTunes chart. Only to have my daughter Simone tell me, Dad, that's an AI. I was like, what? Solomon Ray is an AI artist, not a human being. Man, she busted my bubble too, because I really like that music. So that is the inroads that AI is making, and it's just beginning, really, to be honest. While AI has great potential benefit for us, what are the dangers to be aware of? And this is really what's important to understand. AI replacing human workers, which will force more forced retraining or dependence on government help. Because people are going to be losing jobs. Think of what we've discussed that AI will do. Those tasks, those problems that were being solved were normally solved by human beings. It took a longer time to do, but they were solved by human beings. Now it's being done by AI. So quite naturally, people are going to lose jobs, which means they're going to be forced to get another job, retrain, gain other skills, or become dependent on the government. And there is talk that reaching a point where it's going to become the norm that the average citizen gets a certain paycheck from the government to sustain living. That's the dirty little secret nobody's really talking about, that AI is eventually going to take over, whether we like it or not. AI in particular and technology in general, it could make us more dependent upon it to even just live life, because the danger is AI can do so much for you that there are natural skills that you have that will either go away or become very dormant because you don't need to use it anymore. For example, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but it just kind of gives you an indicator of what could happen. I don't know about you, but I don't memorize people's phone numbers anymore. I don't have to. When I was growing up, you had to remember folks' phone numbers. Right now, the only phone number I can spit out to you other than my own is my wife's. Because everything is stored right here. And I don't know if you've been paying attention to a lot of the updates that come to the operating systems to your phone now. You don't even have to open the text messages. It summarizes it for you. And you can decide whether or not you want to open it. And so a lot of what we would normally do as human beings, AI is doing for you, which means you're not going to use those skills anymore. My wife being an educator, one of the things she told me when I was growing up, you had to know your Roman numerals. But kids today, if they look at a clock with Roman numerals, they have no idea what they're looking at. Because they're not taught Roman numerals anymore. As far as we're concerned, they don't need it anymore. We have digital clocks and they have phones. It's those small things. Now, those are small things. But as AI continues to grow and its influence in our society continues to grow, a lot of the things that we would normally do, we won't do. We won't find the need to do it. One of the things that my brother, who's a pastor up in Chicago, introduced me to, there's a app, or it's not really an app, it's actually a site you can go to called Sermon AI. If you wanted to, you could have it prepare the sermon for you. So there's a big debate in ministry circles as to whether or not AI should be used as a tool in sermon building. Now, I'm not saying AI can't assist you. If there are certain things you want to look up, facts you want to bring forward, because that happens with a Google search. But the temptation, especially the busier you get as a pastor or a ministry leader, to depend on AI to spit the sermon out for you, that temptation becomes greater. So that's the reason why I say, and think about this. I don't know, did I have this as a note? Let me see. Yeah, this is my biggest concern. Inevitably, the convenience of AI will cause us to surrender control of our lives bit by bit if we are not careful. Things like a lot of people don't have books. They don't open books anymore. They have their phones. They can download it on the Kindle, that type of thing. But research is coming out telling us that people retain a whole lot more of what they read when they read it from an actual book than when they read it from a computer screen. Because you have to invest a lot more. There's something that happens between the person and the person handling the book, that there's a bond, if you will. How many people have a special Bible that they use? I know I do. Because you get used to it. You know, you get to the point you almost can turn to any place in the Bible. You can have this in your mind, and by just doing that, you can almost be there, if not be there. That's how familiar you become with it. But you don't, it's impossible for that to occur on a computer screen. Those are the small things that could become a real problem later on. So we have to really be careful when it comes to AI. Here's something to think about. No matter how efficient, AI cannot substitute for what it means to be human. It cannot. I was thinking about this morning. And I've had to tell myself, don't stop being lazy. Stop being lazy. In terms of how I read, how I study. Because you can become very dependent on these tools. Even in terms of relationships with humans, with your spouse, with your children. People use this right here as a substitute for actual interaction. And the biggest thing is we have to use the tool, not the tool use us. Or a better way to put it, the tool serves us, not us the tool. But what's happening is people are allowing this and AI and all kinds of technologies to become what they serve and what they depend on. It's going to reach the point, mark my word, where people, because of these AIs, these artificial intelligences that can actually come up as a real person for an individual, folks are going to bond quicker with the AI than they will with normal human beings because it's easier. There's less risk of being hurt by an actual person. So people are going to become more dependent on that. And here's something that's very important for us as Christians to understand. AI is not a substitute for true worship or for the Holy Spirit. It's not a substitute. We cannot allow artificial intelligence in the church to make such inroads that our worship revolves around it. Can it assist? Yes, sure. But the temptation will always be there for it to become dependent upon it. And as believers, as ministry leaders, we have to be careful that that does not occur. There's no substitute. That's the reason why my brother told me about Sermon AI some months ago. I've yet to subscribe to it. And the main reason is my concern with the fact that it's not a substitute for being led by the Spirit of God. It's not a substitute. And it can happen. It can happen. Now, I have here, where does AI fit in the context of the last days? Go to Revelation 13. Revelation chapter 13. Now, mind you, what I'm doing here is pure speculation. But I happen to believe artificial intelligence is going to play some type of role in the last days. So in Revelation chapter 13, here is where the beast from the sea, this is the Antichrist who's going to arise in Revelation chapter 13. Now, we're not going to read all of those verses, but what I do want to go to is verse 14. Let's read verse 14. Speaking of the beast that arises from the sea, it says, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast. That's talking about the false prophet. Telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. Is it possible that in verse 14 that the image of the beast is connected to AI? Because imagine a generation of individuals who all they know is the computer screen, the smartphone, and artificial intelligence. There are some things that they're going to do just simply by natural reaction. That's all they know. If you have a teenager, I want you to do an experiment. Take away their phone for 2 hours and see what happens. See how they react. Many of them are going to panic because I got to have my phone. Now, if you raise a generation that's that dependent on technology and artificial intelligence, it's almost as if they're going to become so dependent on it, their life is plugged into it. It's their very life. So people in that position, could they be moved to worship the image of a beast? They could. Especially if this occurs. Look at verse 16. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the beast, or the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The more dependent you become on technology, and especially artificial intelligence, the more vulnerable you're going to be to taking the mark. We were talking earlier before class starts, like in China, they get social points based on their conduct. And if you lose social points, that means you lose privileges and even the ability to buy certain things. And you have to earn those social points back. So China is already using a system like that. They just don't have a mark involved yet. And so that's why it's so important that as believers, we watch what happens with artificial intelligence. Can it be used as a tool for our benefit? Yes, and we should. But just remember, it's not a substitute for human beings, and it's definitely not a substitute for God. So lastly, what I want to do is go to Matthew 24. Matthew 24. We've already covered this passage of Scripture, but I thought it was important to end with this passage because I believe most of you, if not all of you, know this is going to be the last time I'm teaching prophetic breadcrumbs for a while, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But Matthew 24, verse 32, Jesus tells us the parable of the fig tree. It says, now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near the end, at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. So what I want to encourage you to do, even after today, is to continue to pay attention to what is going on. Be led by the Holy Spirit. If you get a check in your spirit about something, but you may not know exactly what it is, do a little research, do a little digging, pray about it. Because it's going to become more and more important. I believe one of the gifts of the spirits is going to become very important in the days that lie ahead is the gift of discernment. The ability to discern true from what is a lie. The ability to discern good from evil. Because believe it, especially for many people, even in the church, but especially those who are non-believers, the ability to discern good from evil. And if you want to know the test for that, we got a test right now in front of our face where people don't know the difference between good and evil. Just look at Israel and how people treat Israel. I knew on October 7th, after they got attacked, the whole world's going to rally around Israel. And the total opposite has happened. The inability to discern between good and evil. And so discernment is going to become very, very important. Now, I think it's only fair that I share with you the reason why I came to the decision to end it right now. There's several reasons why. The main ones being, I've been thinking about this for a while. And the reason why I've been thinking about it is because there are things that I know I need to study and dig deeper into. And it's difficult for me to dig deeper into these things and at the same time teach prophetic breadcrumbs. Things like the temple, things like the tabernacle, all of those different things, especially when you look at Daniel chapter 9, they're going to play a huge part in the end of days. Something that's been happening to me lately are people coming to me, either texting me or coming to me individually about different things that are occurring in the world. And so I want the ability to speak from a stronger position than what I am in right now. And so that means I need to kind of shut away a little bit, if you will, to bone up on these things. I believe Prophetic Breadcrumbs, I'm going to restart it again. It's either going to be in this format, but I believe it's more likely going to be I'm going to start my own YouTube channel. That's what I'm leaning toward. And I'm going to seek, and I'm going to get with Pastor Joe Grimes, and because he knows how to work all that kind of stuff. It's the best way to do that because I want this to reach more people. Not because people need to hear my voice. They don't need to hear my voice, but they do need to hear the voice of the Lord. They need to hear the truth. And I know not everybody talks about what I talk about or discuss. And so that's the real reason for this. Also, one of the other reasons too is it's difficult for people to be here at 8:30 in the morning. It is. Sometimes I came in here rushing this morning. It's difficult for folks to be here, and there's really not another time for me to be able to teach this. So that's why I'm going to use this opportunity. probably going to take like 6 months where I'm really focused in, drawing near to the Lord and digging into those subjects and digging deeper into some of the things that we've discussed here as well. I'm going to stay on top of artificial intelligence because that, I'm telling you, that's going to be huge. And we need to, I believe, as part of my calling, to be able to help the church understand these things and even help direct it. And so that's the whole point of what I'm doing right now. Prophetic Breadcrumbs is not going away forever. It's going to come up. It's just going to come up in a newer and better form. So that's the reason for me taking this break. If you still have questions or things that you want to ask me about what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're reading or studying, please feel free to send those things to me because I have no problem. People do that as well. They'll send me questions and then I'll respond to them. In fact, I just thought about 2 that I promised to do after Christmas I haven't gotten to yet. So I need to do that. And so thank you guys for your support over these last 2 or 3 years that we've had Prophetic Breadcrumbs in this format. And I encourage you to look forward, pay attention, because it's going to arise in a different form. Thank you, and God bless.